Boker Tov. Good morning, everybody. Late morning. I will start with 3 introductions. I'll present myself. My name is Boaz Genut. I used to run Torah Mitzion when Zev was away. And now I'm working for Tzohar, which I believe you all know. I'll give 3 introductions. I have to forgive my English, but I do speak the most language common in the world, craft English. So you'll have to work out around this, okay? That's me. I'm not a native English speaker. This is who I am. What?
Espagnol or Francais?
Okay. Didn't really... Yeah, and that's one. Introduction number 2. It's not the first time I'm speaking in front of you. The setup was different at the time. There was a time I was standing over there, and actually on the very same topic. And the reason why I chose to does anyone remember? No? Good for me. No, I was talking about, right, I gave, thank you so much for remembering. I really appreciate it.
Somebody was paying attention.
Yeah. Look, most of the Rabbanim are very grateful for the fact that people lose their memories. They build on it.
What?
What? I don't. But so thank you so much for remembering. I did speak twice here. One on this topic, and there was another time I was talking about a proof of Judaism, Shorashim project that we have. But I'm going to go back to this subject, and that's the third introduction. Why would Yerushalmi boy deal with issues of organ donations? I don't have any personal, connection. No one in my family has given or and received or gave donations. Baruch Hashem. The reason is because in the last 10 years I'm involved very heavily in escorting. Would be the right way to do livui of families, accompanying, joining. Okay, all those words that struggle and with the subject, and the reason is because something terrible happened to them. One of the relatives passed away, most of the times tragically, and at the very moment when they've been told that their beloved passed away, on the very next sentence is, but he died in a way that enables him to give organ donations. Would you consider that? And then starts the balagan, as we say, because many people don't know, never dealt with this. So in the last 10 years, this is what I do. There is an official partnership of the Ministry of Health and Tzohar, where we operate or manage the rabbinical advisory team that helps families to understand what they're facing, what the halacha has to say about it, etc. And I was privileged to hand out the phone that coordinates all the efforts. In other words, in every single hospital in Israel, I don't know if you know the reality is, in every single hospital in Israel, there's one person, normally a nurse, who is in charge of this whole process of organ donations. Her title is Meta'emet Hashtalot. The moment the issue comes up, she's getting involved wherever it happens, in whatever department in the hospital, and then she walks along with the family in the entire process. And if she finds a family that has issues with the halachic situation, then she would turn to me and say, would you speak to them? Would you come and sit with them? And then start the process. So basically the hospital is the one who's bringing me in, and I was privileged to, I don't know, accompany maybe 300, maybe even more families in the processes. Not every time the outcome is yes, we donate, but many times it does, and it's a fascinating process to see. It's not easy to handle, but I will share with you what's happening behind the scenes, and also what happens in my mind when I meet the people and how I think when I handle it. So, in case you didn't remember the other shiur, so now it's your time to remember the second shiur. I will go with this like as deep as you want. There are too many sources here that we can go through, but it's up to you guys. Okay, so.
You want to deal with Haredim and they look at it differently?
Of course, I will bring the Haredim opinion here.
And they look at it differently, halachically?
Of course, it's a big debate. That's the heart of the of the discussion here. Okay.
You're not talking about kidney donation. You're talking about when somebody's died.
Yeah, I'm talking from donations from the dead, and not from the living.
No.
Okay, it's different. In the living, there's another element, is a halachic element. Are we allowed, or there's one allowed to hurt himself to save someone else? That's a whole different, fascinating discussion. We're not going to discuss it today. Okay. So the number one halachic debate that we have to deal with is obviously, how do we define death, right? What defines, from a halachic perspective, the very moment that a person is dead? Look, normally, we all talk about that the heart stops beating, right? What?
Brain.
Okay. It's very rare, but sometimes 0.03 of the cases of death are a result not of the fact that the heart died, but the brain totally died. It goes quite together. Let's say once the heart stops beating, then no oxygen comes to the brain, right? And therefore the brain will also die shortly after. But so therefore it always comes right after. But sometimes it comes the other way around. That first the brain dies completely. When I say completely, it's very important, because unlike coma or any other situations where it's not fully, it's only when we have a complete analysis that shows that the entire brain dies, then the heart still keeps beating, because the heart is not totally dependent on the brain. It has its own beat system, okay? And therefore oxygen still comes up to all the organs, and if we catch it on the right time and we keep the body working, although the brain has already died, we can, that's exactly the narrow window that we have in order to step in and take organs and save other people's lives. That's the medical, like begadol situation. It's very rare. It's only the late a couple of decades that it's even possible to do that, and therefore it brought up a huge dispute on what defines death. Do we have to wait until the heart dies and only then we can define the person died, or brain death alone, okay, is okay? Actually, the medical term is not brain death. It's called mavet mochi neshimati. It goes along with the lungs, right? With breathing. So it's always considered. And the debate, actually, the halachic debate, is between mavet mochi neshimati or mavet levavi neshimati. What's the connection? And we'll see that in halacha. There was I'm not to say that. By the time of that discussions took place in the days of the Rishonim, they felt that they knew, this is what they knew, that there's a connection between the heart and the lungs, and therefore it's one can testify on the other, whether it's still on or not. So, and therefore we talk about mavet mochi neshimati. In other words, the death of the brain can testify that there's no neshima, or we need the heart to testify that there's no neshima anymore. Why? Because the breathing is the very core understanding of what defines death or a living person according to halacha. Breathing only. What?
Yeah, but you said it's just life. It's working in the right way.
Yeah, but life is complex. One thing leads to another, and the pinpoint is the breathing.
Yeah.
The question is what is exactly. All right. So to follow this discussion, let's start. We know the halachic rule that pikuach nefesh, right? Doche et kol haTorah kula, right? No mitzvah stands in front of pikuach nefesh, and the rule, the source for that obviously is the pasuk in Vayikra, source number 1, v'chai b'hem ani Hashem. All right, and therefore the Mishnah in Masechet Yoma says not only pikuach nefesh, also any safek pikuach nefesh, even if it's a doubtful situation, still it's dochet Shabbat. And the situation that is being brought up is someone whose house or wall, something fell on him, and now we need to start violating the Shabbat by removing stones and whatever is necessary in order to reach to the person and see what his situation. We don't know what happened to him. And therefore, Mishen Afla Alav Mapolet, regardless what level of doubt we have, whether Safek Usham, Safek Lo Sham, Safek Uchai, Safek Umet, Safek Yehudi, Safek Lo Yehudi, any kind of doubt, we don't care. Safek Pikuach Nefesh, still there's a slight chance we are Mechalel Shabbat for him, Mefakchim. In other words, we remove all the stones and whatever is necessary. V'im met, Yanichu. In other words, once we found the person, we checked on him, and we found him dead. Okay, we do not continue removing the stones. We wait for Motzei Shabbat, and only then we do that. Fine. So the question comes up, and the Gemara is asking, okay, how do you check whether a person is dead or not? It's a Gemara. So the Gemara in source number 3 says, Adei Chanu Bodek, like a good halachic discussion, dispute. One opinion is Ad Chotmo, the nose. V'yesh Omrim Ad Libo. Okay? Now in the context of the Gemara there, and it's very clear, and all the Rishonim state that the question is not, no one thinks that the nose, right, is the source of life, right? It's just a way to testify whether the breathing is still on or not. Okay, it's a very simple. Okay, or it's very low level of functioning, right? The nose, but this is what they had. So therefore, the question is: is it okay to rely on this simple test for that, or should we further explore and find other places? And that's exactly the dispute, right? Ad chotmo, or no, maybe the heart. If the heart still beats, that means, from their understanding of medicine at the time, that the breathing is still going on, and therefore, this is what you do: you uncover the body or the person, not the body. You need to check whether it's the body or not. You uncover the person, and then let's say you reach to the person's legs, okay? Rapapa states, let's read it. Machloket mimata lemata. Okay, mimata lemata. In other words, you digged, you removed all the stones, and then you see his legs. Okay, you keep on until where? Do you have to reach all the way to his nose, or it's enough that you reached his heart and listen to his beating? Okay, that's exactly the machloket. Aval milemala lemata. But if you happen to reach to the person from his head, and therefore you reach the nose before you reach the heart, shuv ein tzarich, and you checked it out and tested it out, and it's not working, that's enough. In other words, the only dispute is do we need to wait for the heart beating to testify the breathing or not? Okay, that's the origin. Now it's very clear that the heart, the very core is the breathing, and therefore, when a question came up to the Khatam Sofer in the 18th century, where the European governing of his area, not just in his area but in other places, ruled a very dramatic decision where, given the medical situations where people were identified as dead, I'm not talking about Jewish medicine doctors, I'm talking about general medicine. Many times, or enough times, it happened that after defining someone as dead, after determining someone is dead, a few days later he woke up and stood up. It happened, and therefore there was this decree that you have to wait. I think it was 5 days between the time that you declare someone dead until you are allowed to bury it. And what?
In France, the last 20, 30 years was 3 days.
3 days, fine. And look, no refrigerators, right? We all know what happens to bodies after 5 days, and there's a halachic principle of lo talin nivlato ala etz, means no, you have to bury the person as soon as you can. What do you do with that? So Khatam Sofer is trying to go into the situation, and he rules what everybody quotes later on, what we already know from the sugya. It's a straightforward Rishonim and Achronim who say breathing. That's the point, and therefore he when he gets into this the discussion, he makes it very clear and rules that out. The thing is that since the Rishonim and the Khatam Sofer, medicine moved on, and we all know now that breathing depends on the brain.
Stem.
How's that?
Stem.
Stem? Geza moach?
Yeah.
Okay, Geza moach. So it depends on the brain's stem. Thank you. So the brain stem, the last very core function of the brain before it dies, is the place to examine whether breathing is still an option or not. Okay, and therefore the question came up: can we define someone dead once we have a clear examination of the brain, including the stem, right? The stem, including the stem, can we rely on that or not? Now, the question started in the late 70s in Israel. Historically, Hadassah and another hospital were trying to bring in Israel the idea of organ donations and planting it into others. At the time, medicine managed to improve the results, unlike in the 60s where it was very poor results. In the late 70s, it became a better option. When we say a better option from halachic perspective, means that the person who received the organs managed to live over a year. We are now in, whoever learns Daf Yomi knows that treifa, right, is an animal that cannot live for over a year. And when you get 70% of the people who manage to live over a year, and I think 50 something at the time, and now it's even better, lived even 3 years after that, then it really became a serious issue. And I bet you all know, and it's famous, that Rav Moshe Feinstein was one of the few Achronim who, in the beginning, stated very much against the process from a halachic perspective, and then changed his mind and decided that it's okay halachically. Okay, but this is the discussion that came up, and it came to the chief rabbinate. In other words, the Ministry of Health realized that they cannot run the show here in this case without the rabbinate or a rabbinical authority. Therefore, the rabbinate was the one, and they turned to the rabbinate and said, you need to make up your mind. Are you for it or against it? And this whole rabbinical world at the time was stormed up with this discussion, and it was Rav Shaul Israeli, one of the members of the Moetzet HaRabbanut Rashit, who wrote a long tshuvot, where basically this is something to explore and in a positive way. So the Rabbinate has formed a committee headed by Professor Steinberg, may he be well, Bezrat Hashem, and a good Rav Yigal Shafran. These two were appointed to bring in to the Rabbinate Council the results of their research. What shall be the halachic recommendations in order to approve, from a halachic perspective, for the state of Israel to perform these kind of operations. So after a long time, and it was you can see that in 1987, you can see that source number 7, the chief rabbinate had its committee. You can read it on. Ishra pe echad, which is very interesting line to read. Everybody on the council have agreed that whether to approve or not to approve from a halachic perspective, to say it's allowed or not allowed to reach to organ donations. And I will not go through everything, but I do want you to relate, to point number 5. See that? המקובל בעולם הרפואה שקביעה כנ"ל דורשת 5 תנאים. Okay, these are the 5 conditions, again, from medical perspective, in order to determine that someone has complete brain death. One is ידיעה ברורה של סיבת הפגיעה. We know why it happened, and it's not unclear. 2, הפסקה מוחלטת של הנשימה הטבעית. In other words, you examine breathing and it's not there. הוכחות קליניות שאכן הגזע המוח הרוס. Clinical proofs that the brain is fully not functioning. No, that's the next one. The next one. Okay? הוכחות אובייקטיביות על הרס גזע המוח. Now this line is the most important one. In other words, the rabbinate has decided to approve that it's okay halachically if we include a test that is objective. Unlike any clinic observation is always up to the doctor, right? Whoever observes that. When the rabbinate has decided to require an objective test.
Definition.
What?
Definition of
Not definition. Test. Test.
No.
No, it's not. It's not the same. It's not a test. It's not the same.
Actual procedures to determine whether
And I have to say, no other country in the world requires an objective test like that. None of them. Some do, but it's not part of ruling. In general, very few countries have ruling, have a law, have a bill that to do that. That's very unique to Israel. What?
I worked in pediatric intensive care and we had an apnea test.
Apnea test is a clinic test.
But it's specific.
Yeah, but it's a clinic test. It's not an objective test. When I talk about objective test now, objective test is SPECT, for example. It's not apnea test. The apnea test, we know. Like SPECT. I forgot the other machines that they use. It's a special CT test that you do. It's been done by a machine and not by a human. That's the point. Not all human operated. It's an objective that's done by a machine. That's the objective test. Okay, and as I said, in no other country requires that. Many do that. It's part of the procedure, right? You are suspicious that someone has brain death. You need to check it out. So that's one of the tools to use it. But they don't need it in order to define death. If you have the clinic like the apnea test, you would do that. In Israel, you have to have an objective test. Okay? And I have to tell you, and I said that's one thing. The second thing I said, it's important to understand that Israel is, I think there's very few other countries who ruled a specific way how to define brain death. These are the steps by law. In other words, it's not just from halachic perspective. Also, the civil process is the same. Okay, just to understand how awkward it is, right? The number one, I have to say, the privilege that a doctor has is to define someone is dead, right? The only country that, even if you finished your medicine school and you are a top doctor, you're not allowed legally to define someone has brain death unless you went through a whole different process of being authorized to do that. A couple hundreds of doctors in Israel on law only are allowed to do that in Israel. No other country has this system. In other words, you can be, I don't know, you can head the emergency care department. If you didn't go through the specific process, you will not be allowed to sign on that certificate for in this particular case. It's very, 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 very rare. Okay, and that's all because someone in Israel we should be proud of it, thought a few years forward and realized that unless you bring in ethics, halacha, spiritual, unless you bring in other people, look, begadol, the discussion of what defines death is not a medical decision. It's a social decision. And therefore, other, elements in the society have what to say about it, including halacha, including you name it. Whoever is involved in society needs to be part of this decision. Now, without the doctors, we don't know what we're facing, but it's not for the medicine to decide, it's for society to decide that. And therefore, I think someone was smart enough to understand that you need halachic advice for this bill, and therefore, this is exactly what they did. Okay, so I would say, fine. The chief rabbinate has ruled that it's okay. Let's celebrate, right? Mm-hmm. Well, not so much. First of all, other poskim did not feel committed to the chief rabbinate, and on the very top, the most senior posek that we can speak of, obviously, is Rav Elyoshiv. Rav Elyoshiv, the great, by the way, he was part of the system of the rabbinate for many years. He's not outside of the system. He served as a dayan in Beit Din Agadol. He ruled right against it, and the reason why he ruled against it is because he was choshesh, as we say from a halachic perspective, to the shita of Rashi, who says, no, you need to wait until the heart stops beating in order to testify that breathing is no longer on, and therefore, as a result, he said, we cannot just. It's true that brain death testifies loss of breathing, but this is not the only halachic requirement for that, and you need to also wait for heart to stop beating, and that's a problem because although there's a new method now that enables that even after heart failure, you still can what only for kidneys and only very specific way to do that. It's still in its very beginning, but there is a way to preserve a kidney, so it would still be useful after heart death. But when you first of all, you cannot take heart, that's for sure, and nothing else that is life saving. Therefore, Rav Elyashiv stated that, and this whole success of the chief rabbinate ruling that it's okay started to shake. And the reality is that started a process in which more and more Gedolim have to express their opinion about this topic. So, for example, the famous story, if you don't know, you need to know, is Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, who was expert in medicine and halacha, and he was approached by the committee that I mentioned, Rabbi Shafran and Rabbi Steinberg, in which he was supposed to express his opinion, and they shared with him all the knowledge, and he went back and forth, yes or no to support organ donations, yes or no, and then came the famous story with the sheep. You know that? Okay, hope you are over 18. The committee has suggested him that an animal or a person without a head is a dead person. Can we all agree on that? Fine. At least that. Okay, so a beheaded animal basically is not alive. What if we prove to you, said this committee to Rav Auerbach, that a beheaded sheep can give birth, can live? So they got a permission. It was a process, and they beheaded a sheep which was pregnant. Believe it or not, she gave birth a few weeks after she was beheaded because they kept her alive, not alive, functioning. She's not alive. It's not alive. How?
Medical person.
Okay. Check for this. It was online, an amazing story, and he was that close to be convinced. Yet he said, "You know what? I'm not sure I can sign on this. That's really chaval." He didn't sign on it. The only good thing that happened from this process was that he did not sign on Rav Elyashiv's psak that giving out donations is a murder. At least that. So avoiding is also a success, even though that the major success did not come in with his signature. Another chashuv, posek chashuv that we always look up to is Rav Ovadia Yosef. What was Rav Ovadia Yosef's opinion on this matter? This is where we are, okay? Because on his very last year of Rav Ovadia, he was asked to express his opinion about it. So he called up his student, Rav Shlomo Amar, who was at the time the chief rabbi, and I told him, look, check this out, and let's. So he checked it out and came back to him, and there was a meeting, okay, in which Rav Shlomo Amar wrote the letter that you have here in page 3, where it says, דעת תורה, בישיבתנו היום לפני מרן הראשון לציון פוסק דורנו, רבנו עובדיה יוסף שליטה, הופיעו הפרופסורים הרב אברהם שטיינברג והרב יגאל שפרן, ועוד, ואחרי שמסרו סקירה מפורטת ותמציתית, I'm reading the handwriting of שלמה אמר, מרן שליטה הביע דעת תורה, שמעיקר הדין המוות נקבע עם מות המוח כולו, כולל גזע המוח והפסקת הנשימה באופן בלתי הפך, ובלבד שהכל יעשה על פי נאמנים שיקיימו ועדה מיוחדת הכוללת תלמידי חכמים בקיאים בעניין זה, שתברר בדקדוק ואמיתות שאכן ננקטו כל הצעדים הדרושים ונערכו כל הבדיקות הראויות בזה בלא יוצאים מכלל, וגם בזאת דורש לא משנה נדלג על זה, לראיה בימיהם נא באנו על החתום ביום הנ"ל שלמה משה אמר, and then in the very end the handwriting of Rav Ovadia says, it's hard to read, but it says basically okay, that he he signs on this psak. One page, dramatic page. Dramatic page. Because if you call the so-called grandchildren of Rabbi Ovadia Yosef on their hotline, hot phone call line, whatever, and you ask the question, the answer would be no.
They're not Rabbi Yosef.
They're not Rabbi Yosef, but they would claim that this is Rabbi Ovadia Yosef's opinion. Now, when you face them with this letter, they would argue two things. One is, well, there was a condition there, and the condition was that a rabbi, a Talmid Chacham, will be involved in the process. And indeed, that when the chief rabbinate has agreed to that, that was the chief rabbinate decision, ruling as well. That only if a Rav is involved in the process, not just a Rav, someone who understands what's happening. Let's say Rabbi Professor Steinberg. It's a great example. If he's involved, that's fine. But he says, well, that's not a process. That's not a process. That's one. Two, they would say that he meant, and I think that's a straightforward lie, to my opinion. He meant just for defining someone's death, and not for the sake of Turumat Evarim. Because if you look at this, they say, well, מרן שליטה הביע דעתו דעת תורה שמעיקר המוות נקבע עם מות המוח כולו. But it is true that the letter speaks in the context of organ donations, but it's not stated mefurash, like clearly. So they argue, therefore, that he did agree for the brain death, but he did not agree for organ donations. Okay? And that's where we are. That's where we are. Yeah.
If it's not in order to determine organ donation, why bother about whether it's brain dead or not brain dead?
Of course.
What are the...
Afelut, onen. There's so many rules. So many rules. Kohanim. We'll go through that in a second. There's so many things depend on that. Okay. So here's the deal. So when I'm being called up to sit with families, I always have to understand who they are, who they listen to, who would they listen to. In other words, it's one thing to reach out to the Dati Leumi family, and one thing is to a Shas family or Litvish family. It's very, very different. Look, I'm the last one to fight back Rabbi Eliashiv's opinion. That's his halachic opinion. It's fair. But here's what I'm fighting back. I'm fighting back 2 or 3 situations that I cannot understand. One is people who are not true at all. Nothing. They really keep nothing. As you know, when death comes, everybody becomes not just frum, they become ultra-Orthodox. Okay? And this I cannot understand. You live your life the way you live, and then all of a sudden you ask for advisory from people whose halachic, let's say, dynamic is very machmir, why is that? I can understand why you want halacha. I'm all for halacha. But why that type? That's one. The other thing that I cannot hold is people who take advice from people who not only do not understand what they're talking about, they don't really they think they know everything. And look, I'm a rabbi, and I have colleagues, and I have but one thing a rabbi needs to know is to say, I don't know. I never dealt with the question. I don't know how it looks like. The fact that I'm ordained rabbi doesn't mean that I know everything. And let's be fair. This is even if you understand in medical, in medicine and halacha issues, even if you understand in this issue, it's a very narrow situation, very, very narrow, and you need to be humble and say, I don't know. Ask people who understand. Not to mention, and I can send you over all kind of TikTok rabbis who in the no, I'm telling you, I'm devastated. Okay, who without even understanding what damage they do, they say words in such a harsh and irresponsible way that it freaks me out. On this category, okay, I would tell the following story. You all heard of Berland? Berland? Yeah, some people call him Rabbi Berland. I don't. Who is heading as a Breslov group in Yerushalayim. And here's the following story. A family whose the father of the family had a terrible accident, and he was defined as dead due to his brain death. A little boy, 14 years old, his son. Very hard for him to accept that, which is normal. Definitely happens many times. But then he was going from time to time to a Breslov youth group that had one of the guides there he was in touch with. That's the only connection he had to religion. That's the only one, which is great. But so he calls him up and says, "Well, I'll get you Berland to come." Now, Berland to come, you need to understand what it means. It means that the so-called person who helps Berland calls him up and said he will come to revival your father. Don't listen to the doctors. He's going to come. He's going to do pidyon. It's called pidyon nefesh. It's going to cost you 50,000 shekels. Okay, and you need to give it to him in cash in advance. Okay, so the guy, I speak to the boy. Now he's so overjoyed.
How old is he?
14. He doesn't have, but he has a chance. He has a hope. Someone gave him hope. Everyone else told him you should accept that. No, someone at least gave him hope. So I'm speaking to him, and he says to me, "Rabbi, I need you to help me. I need to raise 50,000 shekels." And he's driving his entire family crazy for that. And he gets the 50,000 shekels. And he comes late at night because Bela knows that no one will let him in unless he sneaks in. Okay, and he comes 2 a.m. in the morning. He does his pidyon nefesh after receiving the money, and he looks at the boy's eyes and says, "Abba is going to say kiddush this coming Friday at home." And this is what freaks me out. Okay, I told the entire staff my role here is not to convince him to give donations. I'm not working on that. I just need him to accept the fact that his father passed away. And whatever I did, it was whatever I did. And guess what? His father was not saying Kiddush on Friday. So that's the second category of people whom I cannot embrace.
50,000 shekels?
What?
Did they ever get the 50,000 shekels?
In back? What do you think?
Well, if there was a lawsuit, maybe.
Okay. The third category of people who I really have a hard time is people who are willing to receive donations but are not willing to give. And these are the only 3 types of people that freak me out. And in the process, the rest of the time I'm a calm guy, and I get along with people pretty well. I do want to share with you what happens when I speak to family and tell them, look, it is a debate, halachic debate. Nevertheless, major poskim, I would say even more. Most of the poskim, definitely the Rishonim, but also in the Achronim, has received brain death as death. Period. In other words, I'm very sorry, but what the doctors told you, according to Israeli law, is also accepted from halachic perspective. I'm very sorry, but your relative, whoever it is, passed away, and I'm really משתתף בצערכם. Now you ask me about תרומת איברים, so yes, it's a big what? If it's such a big mitzvah, why there was no one single chief rabbi since the late 90s, the late 80s, I'm sorry, since they ruled it, that no one single chief rabbi has called the public to donate organs. The only thing they do is say it's okay from a Halachic perspective. It's two different things. And this is where I struggle, okay? So some 12 years ago, along with the Ministry of Health, we ran a campaign. You can see one page of this campaign. You can see it in page number 6, where we took all the religious Zionist leaders, and I want you to look at the picture. Do you recognize the people who are here all on the same page? Do you?
Yeah.
Okay, that's amazing. I think this was the last campaign that enabled to bring in all religious Zionist Rabbanim from any kind of, let's say, specific segment, from Har Hamor, Chardal, Dati Leumi, liberal, everybody from when you have Rav Yuval Sherlo, for example, that's not here, but it's in another page of the campaign. It's been photoed with Rav, what's his name in Yitzhar? Rav, forgot the name of the rabbi. What? Rav Dudkevich, right? Rav Dudkevich and Rav Yuval are coming together. You understand that something is different here. I think that's the last campaign that all the Rabbanim in the religious Zionist community from all elements have signed in for this call to actually donate. Okay, so, and I have to say, sometimes you need a campaign in order to close a deal. Okay, that was the close deal for the religious Zionist community. Okay.
Can I just ask you, I'm really not clear. You're called in when there's been an accident and all of these steps here have said that the body is dead?
I can be called in different stages. That's the very last stage. What you describe is the very last stage. In other words, just the process. There are 3 steps in brain death determination. Step number 1 is suspiciousness. In other words, the doctors are suspicious that we have a brain death. Okay, their clinic behavior of the sick person testifies that. That's step number 1. Then comes the objective test, where they take, according to Israel, according to the law, they take them for an objective, and it comes out 100%, not even 1%, not 100% definite that we have brain death. Okay, that's the objective. Okay, step number 3, they call up, which has to be, by the way, between 12 to 24 hours after the objective test. That's part of the rule, and it's called a committee. A committee is made of 2 doctors, come from 2 different doctrines, from 2 different departments. Okay, specialized. Sorry, who never ever treated the patient. They might have give advice, but they were never in charge of the specific patient, and they never were involved in the process before. Okay, and only then, and of course they are authorized, as we said, they're one of the 350 doctors who are authorized to sign brain death certificate, and they run a series of clinic tests, and the apnea is the very last one. Apnea is where you disconnect the person from any other machine aside of just oxygen, and then look at the person's chest and his blood test to make sure to see whether it has even a slight functioning. If it does, we stop the committee and we do not determine death. But if it doesn't, it takes between 5 to 10 minutes that you disconnect the person, and then you know that the person is not alive anymore, and then you sign the very last moment of the apnea test is the very moment that we define that is defined. So in your question, where do I come in? I may come in all different stages, before or after. And it makes, by the way, halachic differences. For example, just if I manage to speak to the family before the committee, the va'ada, I tell them go ahead and say vidui with the patient, because afterwards you don't say vidui after the one is dead, and until the committee we still have a doubt. So I use that in order to tell them go ahead and say that, although it's always best to say when someone is awake, but he's not awake, but at least you can say before he dies.
A few years ago, there was a Halachic issue with liver transplants. They said that you had to harvest the liver before the person was completely dead or something, and then
No,
it was so wrong.
you don't take
What
anything before the person is completely dead.
was that? There was an argument. There's something sticking on liver transplant.
It's always after brain death. Never ever you don't touch a person's body without his permission.
What was the argument about then?
I don't know what you refer to, but I'm telling you, there's no way someone ever took any part of the body before brain death. Nothing. Doesn't happen. Okay?
The people you're talking about, though, are on some, after the brain death, they're on something that's keeping their heart going.
Yeah.
It's not
Medicine.
a natural.
No, it's not natural. It's not natural. If you want to give any treatment or any materials, I call them, it's a matter of minutes. It's a matter of minutes before everything falls apart.
Because of the modern medicine that allows.
Yeah, we managed to keep. By the way, you can medicine can keep the person in this condition a few days, which is amazing. Okay, now here are the questions that come up outside of the yes, no, go, no go question, like is it dead or not? Let's ask you, what questions would you ask? Let's say you are convinced, okay, that the person is dead. Therefore, we have an option to give. What bothers you? What may bother you?
Has the deceased agreed that they can take his organs?
Exactly. He never said anything, right? That's really an agreement. Do we have the right to make decisions on someone else's body? Right? Interesting question. It's also not just halachic, it's an ethical question that needs to be. For that, by the way, the simple answer would be go sign Adi card, Kartis Adi. Okay, where we know what the person wants. It's very important to that we have it. But from halachic perspective, I would tell you that it's not dramatic, because even when one is alive, the person doesn't own his body from halachic perspective. Even when you are alive, you are in charge of your body, but you do not own your body. Okay, and we do. This is the reason why there is the notion of kfiyah in ala mitzvot. The reason why there is even discussion about kofin ala mitzvot or not is because we say that you're not fully in charge. You're in charge, but you're not. It's not yours. And after your death, that it becomes even stronger. So who owns it? Yeah, Hashem would be the easy answer for us. But it's from ethical perspective, who owns it? The state. Could be. Family? What does the family have to do with my body?
What does the state have to do?
Well, state owns whatever no one else owns. That's the only thing that the state has, right?
Soviet-style country.
It's not Soviet country. You need someone to own it. It's not a free someone that needs to own anything, right? So we know that even let's say one parent with no children, no one to continue him. We know that everything goes to the state. Why is that? Are we a Soviet country? Yes, we are. But aside of that, but there is some logic here. Even Soviet people can think logically.
In Canada, when you renew a driver's license, you have to designate whether you want to be able to give parts of your body, do they do that here?
No, here there is a whole different system. It's called Kartis Adi, where serious marketing promotions are being taken care to encourage people to sign on Katis Ali. They even get some benefits from that. So in case one of the family members needs organ donation, so it's part of the criteria who gets first. It's not the only one, but obviously, but from a legal perspective, yes. Who decide? So there is the law, and there is the practical way to do that. The law says that if one signed his agreement for that, that's it. No questions need to be asked. They don't even have to tell the family that they're taking organs. That's the practical way, and I think that's smart. They will never ever take organs without agreement of the family, although it's not the law. But the practical way to do that is getting at least 3 significant signatures of either parents, siblings, or all children, or a spouse that signs that. And I've seen, and it's amazing to see the dynamics in the family. I'll share with you one story. In Rehovot, I was there, an Ethiopian person, again, motorcycle accident, and Ethiopians have very serious issues with the medicine, with the medical world here. I have to say that the medical world earned it in the way they treated them, but nevertheless, it's still a problem. They're very suspicious about it, and also culturally they're less more modern, and they normally Ethiopian Jewry will not, people from the will not give. We do have some examples from the last few years that happened. One of them was the case I was there in Rehovot. Again, the entire family freaked out when they heard that he died. They accepted the death. They could not even consider organ donations. And I've noticed, and not just me, but also the doctor who was there in the room, that of all the people shouting and yelling, it was horrible. There was one person who was silent. That was his wife. She was listening and looking, and the right moment came, and we told her, "What do you say? Would you save someone else's lives? We couldn't save your husband, but would you save your someone else's?" She looked at everybody else and said, "We are giving his donations, and that's it." And it was like, you can tell that sometimes one person can change the entire dynamic, and it's really, really amazing. Other considerations that people bring up, yeah?
Family say, well, if you bury the person without one of his organs, he's not going to go to heaven, he's not going to.
Oh, that's a very consistent argument, which I have to say, I don't know what happens in heaven.
Does anybody?
Oh, some do claim they do. So I'll share with you. And we are in the very last minutes of our lecture. As we speak, I'm about to complete a process of training some more Rabbanim to be part of this initiative. And I brought in more Sephardi Rabbanim because that was the need, culturally, that was needed. And so I asked Rav Shmuel Eliyahu, the son of the great Mordechai Eliyahu, who was the first chief rabbi to rule that it's okay. And I know that he's very supportive of the process. And he came in and presented and talked to the group. It's a very small group of rabbanim. So we asked him the hard questions like that. I would say 2 things that we need to. The Gan Eden one, it's easy to answer because once you perform a mitzvah, then it's supposed to elevate you in Gan Eden. So that's easy. The question comes up: what happens with when in Tchiyat HaMetim, right? So the answer for that is also very simple. We don't know how things going to happen. That's the least problem that we have in this. Although, if you look, we don't have the time. look at source number 10. Gimel Shut Ismach Levad. I won't read it, but read it on your free time. Tshuva from a Moroccan poisek, who say that very clearly. That at the time in Morocco there was an eye surgery, and he said the person is going to come up after Tchiat HaMetim without his eye. So it does appear. I found someone says that, so it's not like a. But at least there are answers. Two things that are very difficult to answer is the when a person said, or we know that he wouldn't agree to that. And I can quote Rav Shmuel. Well, you will not be able to quote what Rav Shmuel said, but Rav Shmuel said, and I heard him telling this to a wife of someone who passed away. I heard him online saying that to people, and he said, she says to him, I know that he hated whatever had to do with medicine. This is also the reason why he died so early, because he never took treatments. He didn't believe, so-called, in medicine. So how can I now work against his will? So Rav Shmuel's answer was amazing. He said, now he knows that he was wrong. Look, even if I was thinking it, I could never say it. But I guess. And if Rav Shmuel is willing to back it. Yeah, absolutely. She wanted. It convinced her. The last thing that is very difficult is the very fact that unlike when you give from your living, when you're alive, that you can designate the donation to, you name it. My friend, my parents, my soldier, you can designate. If you donate a kidney, for example, you can say, I'm giving it to, only to people under the age of 30.
I thought there were priority lists.
Priorities is only from the dead. No, you may say it's altruistic, and I give it to whoever needs, and then there are lists, and from the dead it's unheard of. In other words, to begin with, a family one cannot necessarily tell what to do with his organs, but it's definitely not to designate it to specific, you name it. And the question comes up is, I want my parts to be installed in